Night Vision. Following clues left by our ancestors, we unbury the past to reveal a knowledge of unfathomable value, putting us just a little closer to our own true birthrights. From the secret history of a possible bloodline of Jesus Christ, the secret history of America's founders, to the secret history of extraterrestrial interaction on our planet, here to bring light to the night. Your host for Night Vision Radio, Renee Barnett.
Hey everybody, welcome to Night Vision. Welcome back if you've been here before, and welcome if you're just finding us for the first time. I hope we can provide you with some information and maybe possibly a little entertainment that is going to be edifying and positive for you. Now, tonight we're going to be talking about who exactly was the first discoverer of America, or who were those groups that were coming over. I mean, I think by now we're all a little jaded on the whole Christopher Columbus 1492 thing. I think we've seen a lot of evidence that there were a lot more groups headed over here before then. And I would guess that a lot of politics were at play, just like they always are, as to who gets to claim the prize, who gets to claim the name of the discoverer of America. And we know that traditionally that's been Christopher Columbus. But I would like to explore a couple of other possibilities, starting with the Celts, and then also with the Henry Sinclair expeditions, the so-called Zeno expeditions, and maybe get into a little bit of the controversy surrounding all of those theories, and who knows where else we'll go with this. But to start out, if you don't mind, I'd like to read just a quick couple of paragraphs from the new book, They Did Not Come to Conquer, by Tim Wallace Murphy and James Martin. And I'm going to kick us off with that. And I believe these must be the words of that good old Irishman, Tim Wallace Murphy. He says, I once saw a bumper sticker that proclaimed that God only invented alcohol to prevent the Irish from taking over the world. A somewhat sardonic theory that celebrates two indisputable facts about my fellow countrymen. They tend to drink rather a lot, and they are spread right across the globe. People tend to blame the Irish habit of emigration on the English occupation, but this hasn't always been the primary cause. The Irish were traveling and exploring for many centuries before the English invasion by Strongbow and his henchmen in 1170 CE. Nomadic by nature and intent, inspired Irish Celtic monks traveled across the sea and evangelized much of Western Europe. Some 50 years after the death of Cumbrian St. Patrick on March 17, 461, another Celtic saint continued the work of converting pagans to Christianity. St. Brendan the Navigator, who was born near Tralee, I'm going to let my guest correct me on that, in 484, traveled tirelessly to evangelize following his ordination at the age of 28 years. He frequently crossed the sea to spread the gospel, not only throughout Ireland, but also in Scotland, Wales, and the north of France. According to one 1,500-year-old Irish tale, Brendan embarked on an epic journey at the great old age of 93. And I think that's where I'm going to leave it. And I'm going to bring on my guest and cohort, historian James Martin. Hey, James, welcome back.
Hi, everyone. I hope everyone's well.
We missed you while you were on your sojourns throughout the UK and France. So I'm glad you're back in one spot so that you can join us again. But, you know, I think that's in the book that you wrote alongside Tim, that is those are the first couple of paragraphs in the chapter on the Celts. And I had to laugh when I read that first bit about the bumper sticker and Irishman, because I thought, oh, that's so Tim. That is so Tim Wallace Murphy. And I could just hear him telling that story. But what about this St. Brendan, who supposedly came to the New World, as a nonagenarian at the age of 92, 93?
Yeah, he's a very interesting character. He was born in Tralee, is how you say it, which is in southwestern Ireland. And he's around at a time where in England, the Roman Empire has fallen. You have a series of different kingdoms. That's true in Ireland, but there is the spread and the entrenchment of Christianity in Ireland and some of the islands of Scotland. So he's a contemporary of Columbcille, who is better known as St. Columba, and was really part of that evangelizing period in Ireland, reflecting Christianity and the spread of it. Celtic Christianity is what we would call it today. Very interesting character. I'm sure we'll get into his the proposed voyages, perhaps a little bit of the myths around those voyages. Was it an allegory or did he actually go? As we were talking about before the show, I even read somewhere, I can cite it if need be, where one of the stories is that St. Brendan came across with Prince Madoc, the legendary Prince Madoc, which I guess is there even some controversy over whether or not he was really a real person, or certainly some people posit that he might be the real King Arthur and that sort of thing. But you pointed out to me offline that wasn't even the same time period. No, not at all.
That certainly couldn't have been true. So you hear so many things, just like you do today about everything. You have to really be critical in your thinking and dig deep, because it's so easy to get sort of led down the primrose path with some of these stories and legends, because some of them would be wonderful if they were true, and we'd love to have them be true. But what we really want is what's really true. So I'm sorry. That was my little soapbox.
No, I completely agree. We are a very social animal. We like to tell stories, and sometimes we tell tales that are a bit fanciful, and it's to capture us. And so, we want to believe in the story because it has elements of facts. And in this period of St. Brendan, you have a lot of that. You're trying to sell a message of Christianity, so you embellish it. I mean, did St. Brendan really find Judas Iscariot on a rocky island in the middle of the Atlantic? Probably not. But again, that's telling the message of Judas. And as for Madoc, I mean, we can start off with Prince Madoc if we want. He's around in the 12th century, 1171, around this period. He is the son of a Welsh king, Owen Gwynedd. He was the king of the Kingdom of Gwynedd, which is in northern Wales. And allegedly...
Gwyneth Paltrow, right?
Slightly different spelling, a few D's in there as opposed to... I have to say, in fairness, I think Madoc and Owen Gwynedd would probably be a bit offended to be referenced with Gwyneth Paltrow. I don't know. Depends on people's
no
views.
offense intended.
But Madoc is around. He allegedly ended up on a voyage to the Americas, relatively deep into the what we now call the United States. I tend to look at this as another interesting story of exploration, but the Madoc story explodes in the Elizabethan period. And so if you look at it from this perspective, what's going on in the Elizabethan period? Well, the Spanish are colonizing this newfound land. these Americas, who almost certainly were known about, as are the Portuguese. And it's quite useful for the English crown to lay a claim that we discovered it first. You know, Queen Elizabeth I, or Elizabeth Tudor, a Welsh family. You know, we had our claim previously, and so, you know, there we go. And that's why the story begins to develop and grow legs, and, you know, ends up with the tale that we know today, perhaps.
Right in that you know, some people sort of tried to fit Prince Madoc into the Arthurian stories with it. I mean, have you heard that before, or did I just pull that out of thin air?
I've heard many accounts of Arthur being associated with a variety of different characters. The reality of the situation is the King Arthur, I mean, we did a show not too long ago on this. Arthur is from a different time period. If he did exist, he's not around in the 12th century. Again, the stories around Arthur begin to develop around this period in the sense that the story that we know today is also from the 12th century. You know, I come back, you've got Mallory, who writes later, I think in the 14th century. But almost certainly Arthur is closer, in fact, to Brendan. You know, 5th, 6th century, collapse of the Roman Empire in Britain, much closer in that way to Madoc. And again, there's a few problems with Madoc. He, you know, proposes to have discovered the Americas sort of after he's died, and you know, it's.
And what about that story about, you know, that went around? I think it, you know, really came to the public attention in maybe the 1800s or something like that, when some traveler was supposed to have been traveling through the New World, and he came across a tribe of Indians that spoke Welsh. However, you know, no matter how much I've looked into that, I can't find any kind of real confirmation of that. You know, I don't know whether it was just made up out of whole cloth, or whether or not there might have been certain words that sounded similar to Welsh in that particular tribal language. What do you know about that?
Well, it's like during the colonization of the eastern seaboard of the United States, there were anecdotes of tribes, natives. I mean, ultimately, who discovered the Americas? Well, they were already there. Right. Prize goes to the Native Americans, the Amerindians, etc.
Who are already here.
So what we're talking about is the second place, really, aren't we? We're talking about the silver medal, not the gold.
That's right. Yeah.
There were plenty of anecdotes in the 16th century, so the 1500s, of English speakers, people who spoke European languages, etc. But again, look at it in context. Well, we clearly were here beforehand. We were clearly, you know, whether it's the Welsh, the English, the Scots, whomever, we were clearly here before anyone else, because look, they already speak our language. So it ties in with this idea of, you know, staking your claim and being very certain about it. Again, with the Welsh, I haven't found any real anecdotes apart from, you know, a few online things and a few references in some ill-sourced books about Welsh speakers. Certainly, there are anecdotes and writings of the time of people speaking English, maybe Norse, you know, but I'm not familiar with any of the Welsh speakers, unfortunately. And it's a great tale. I mean, there is a rich tradition in Wales of telling very fascinating, interesting stories. You know, I've been in pubs in Wales and listened to these anecdotes and all of this. And just this one time, being told a story about Madog. Where was it? It was in North Wales, and it turned out most of the people in the pub were descended from Owain, the king, as it happened. So, yeah, great stories, but unfortunately, I think we can rule out the early Welsh exploration of the United States.
When was it to have taken place that Madog made his voyages? Because if I seem to recall there was more than one voyage to the New World. So when would that have been time-wise?
Well, it's alleged that he sets off in 1170, I think, with his brother. I will butcher the name, but I think it's pronounced Reared. But it's alleged that he goes over to the United States, and then I think in 1171 they sail from Lundy Island and end up in Mobile in Alabama, and ended up sailing up the Alabama River. Again, it's alleged Cherokee tribes in that area had said that there were structures that were built by white people, and this is sort of tied into some similarities in construction to Dolwyddo and Castle in northern Wales too. So again, we're in the 1170s. We're in that period. But again, I think we can rule it out. There might be similarities, but when we're looking for concrete evidence, where is it?
Yep. And there were so many people that were alleged or that have laid claim to coming here. And then, of course, there have been discoveries that have given us indications of some of those or others that have been here. We have stories of, people coming from Africa, and some of that is evidenced in the Olmec heads, in Mexico. And we have Chinese expeditions that claim to have come here, and Japanese, Phoenicians, all kinds of people. So if any or all of these are true, it seems like this was quite a busy port of call, for travelers. And then, if any of that is true, then my goodness, all those years later, 400 years later, or, everything that happened previous to that, it's like, how did it come that, this is the one that gets indicated as the true discoverer? Was it a deal made? Was it, Queen Isabella pulling strings, I imagine?
Well, for me, I just want to come back to Madog. I do recall an account of John Sevier, who was the governor, I think, of Tennessee in the late 1790s, referencing some bodies dressed in brass armor, and that was used as evidence for the Madog exploration. But I think realistically, let's set our stall. Every generation thinks that they are more advanced than the last, more enlightened, more noble. And with that, we find in history a deep-rooted academic arrogance to the previous generation. And it's in part, that's our moral system. And what we can't do is use our moral system, use the way that we understand our society, and replace it for what came before. So firstly, if we're setting our stall, it's previous people couldn't. They didn't have the technology. You couldn't travel all that great distance, and that's been the notion really since Columbus. What's going on in 1492 is interesting for me. So, for example, Spain has just become a thing. There had been previous claims to the Empire of Hispania, but in 1492 you have Aragon, which is in southeastern Spain, on the French border.
North.
And you have
northeastern.
Yeah, it depends on your perspective, I guess. But over towards the Mediterranean French border, and you have Castile, which by this point was occupying the central Spain. They unify in 1492. Also, the last remnants of the Moors, the Islamic Caliphate in southern Spain, Cordova, has been pushed out of Spain back into Africa. You have a few interesting ideas of this deeply pious queen of this new Spain, suddenly sending over a voyage of an Italian, or wherever he's from, over to this new world to discover a shortcut to Asia. Total nonsense, and I suspect that as 50 years from now, we'll be laughing at the Columbus story. There's been some very exciting updates in October.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
They're in the book. I specifically stopped print to.
Oh, that's right. Oh, okay. I know about those then.
So Chiesa Pavlo at the University of Milan had uncovered document, a book that it's sort of discussion piece between Genoese and Milanese traders, with a few maps and discussions around these islands, or this landmass further west of Greenland. Now, the thing is with that book, well, tome, if you will, is we've known where that has been since it was copied. This is a copy. No photocopiers back then, so everything was done by hand. So we know where it's been, and it's dated. There is no question about its provenance. No, we know where it is. So if we've got in Genoa and Milan traders discussing, let me tell you this, don't tell anyone, but actually there's some land that way, then how unknown were the Americas really?
Right.
And what exactly was it that Columbus discovered? Well, Columbus didn't step foot in the American landmass. He stepped foot in the Caribbean. For one, I can tell you what he unleashed, genocide, conquest, invasion, things like this. Some of the original examples, by the way, of deliberately infecting natives with smallpox, for example. Yeah. We would call that germ warfare today, a very deliberate thing. And actually, colonists boasted about this. So we know what he unleashed.
Oh, wow.
But what did he discover? I don't think too much. Curiously, I think he took a map. I actually think he landed in the wrong place. But that's Columbus. And I think there is a bit of politic involved. If we go back to the Chicago World's Fair in the 1880s, you have to laugh at this. So it's celebration of Columbus. The Italian Americans very strongly believe that Columbus was the person. Spanish Americans, etc., and on the shoreline at Chicago, quietly slipping in, sort of in the cover of night, was a Norse longboat that had been built and sailed straight. And I thought, brilliant, absolutely great.
Oh, how funny. How funny. Yeah, Columbus Day is a huge Italian celebration in New York. I know that. Probably Chicago too. Chicago has a huge Italian population. And it's like, I guess you'd want to hold on to that, if it was your people that were laying or had been awarded that claim, you wouldn't want to give it up very easily. But, it's like, I guess, probably, the older and uglier I get, the more I just want to know what it is. Yeah, it would be great if this were true or that were true. What a wonderful story that would be. But just give me the poop. Give me the scoop. Give me the skinny. All I want to know is what it really, really is, and, I feel like,
Well,
if I don't.
I think firstly,
Sorry, go ahead.
America deserves better. We can't have a foundation myth that's built on lies. And it's not to take away Columbus's exploits. It has a place in history. There's no doubt about that. No one's trying to take anything away from any culture or any belief, and celebrate Columbus Day. But equally, let's also face the reality that he wasn't the first in the United States, and certainly wasn't in North America. He wasn't. I think that's pretty clear. So I suppose the quest and thing that interests me in sort of editing and then writing a variety of chapters in this book has been, well, my grandma used to say, always speak the truth, James. That way you don't need a good memory.
That's right.
And that's the essence of this. What we're trying to do is uncover the reality, the truth of the foundation of the Americas.
And sometimes it's even more exciting than the fiction, but I tell you, it's really funny because, obviously, we all know, history is written by the victors. And of course, they're going to paint themselves in the best light and their detractors in the worst light. So you got to kind of dig through all that and sort through all that and, get your little nuggets of information here and there and try to read things from the other point of view than they're being written. Look at it from all sides. But it's kind of frustrating that we don't even know our real true history.
And we've spoke on many occasions around genealogy. Why are we interested in that? And it's remembering the people that we might have a close personal connection to, our families, but it's remembering people who did things back in time. That's our quest in life, I think, to be remembered for something. And it upsets their memory if, you can just imagine the spinning in graves and hauntings caused by, look at me, look where I went, and, things like this.
Yeah.
So there we go.
Absolutely. But, and I guess I got way off of dear old St. Brendan. But so you think it's not likely that he made that journey at that age to the Americas? That would be.
I think we can rule out Madoc,
right?
But I think if we just have some context of the period Brendan's in, I'm just going to show an image now for those who are watching this broadcast. You've got an image of Scotland and Northern Ireland. And for those who are listening, imagine Scotland and Northern Ireland. And the islands on the western side of Scotland, Argyllshire, the Western Isles. This isn't in the period of Brendan. So let's give a time period from the 300s to the 600s. That's not his lifespan, don't worry. But in this period, this is a super highway. Most islands have got churches on them. They've got hermitages. They have places of quiet contemplation, etc., etc. And so this really was the equivalent of the highway that you have, or motorway if you're listening in Britain. Very busy with trade and traffic, and a lot of Christian exploration etc. So Brendan himself is around, it's alleged, we don't know the exact date, but he's born in 484, so at the tail end of the 5th century, and it's proposed that he dies in 577, which is a very long time for people to live during this period. You know, the average age is perhaps 20, 30 years old, unless you're incredibly wealthy, incredibly lucky, in which case it might be a little, a little later in age, shall we say. But the quickest way to get around is by sea. And so my next image is an image of the sort of boat that would have been used by sailors in Ireland. This is known as a curragh, and it's a wattle built ship, usually in a hide of whale skin to stop water coming into the boat. And for the Irish, the notion of North America perhaps didn't occur to them, but they did know that there was a landmass over towards the west of Ireland. We know this because there are reports of cod fishing, for example, off the coast of Nova Scotia and across the Maritimes of Canada and the northeastern seaboard of the United States. So Brendan's in this period, late 5th century, and he is contemporary with St. Columba, and they are proselytizing a version of Christianity, Celtic Christianity, a very enlightened form, if you will. I sort of loathe to call it any relation to modern Christianity. For example, you had what was called Brehon law, which saw equality of the sexes, just as an example. And Brendan's plenty of things written about him. We know a little bit about his life. As I say, he was born in Tralee. We know when he was baptized. We know that he went to a monastic school to further his education, so would have been well educated. And it's certainly true at the time that what you have with in Ireland, if anyone is going to learn how to speak Latin, the language of the day, it's going to be taught by Irish monks. So when we talk about clergy, we're talking about clerics and clerks and people who can write. So that just gives us a bit of context, I think, for.
I think you just answered my question that I had boiling around was, because in that passage that I read, it said that, he was evangelizing and converting people to Christianity. And that was going to be my question, was what kind of Christianity was it? It must have been Celtic Christianity, which I would imagine is somewhat different.
A kind of fusion, really, with Celtic beliefs and Christianity and all of this.
Was there a pagan aspect to it?
Oh, almost certainly. So in Scotland, you've got some traditions of what are known as the Sheila na Gigs. Now, I'm not going to describe what they are. They're quite vulgar to our mind, but please feel free to have a look. Sheila na Gig. Very pagan, to do with fertility. But there is a sort of fusion between, the old and the new in this way. Ultimately, Celtic Christianity ends up following the Synod of Whitby in the 9th century, on its way out, steady decline. And the reason for that is the Roman Catholic Church, the Church of Rome, had a different system of calculating Easter. And that was a huge chasm between the two churches, if you will. Celtic Church was certainly less formalized than the Roman one.
So the riff was on what day are we going to celebrate Easter?
Yeah, it's a very big thing. We know this. For example, most castles, certainly religious places, had observatories attached to them so that they could calculate the date of Easter correctly. If you got it wrong, then you'll be invited to the church barbecue. It'll just be you on the menu. It was a very big thing. But again, Easter's a lunar calendar. You've got pagan influences even there. But yeah, a really big thing.
Wow. So what was the calculation like widely different? Like, was it a completely different month and day, or was it, just hours off, or was there a great disparity?
It could be, a few days and weeks between them.
Yeah.
So we're not talking, midnight tonight and what have you. We're talking quite a few days between.
Right.
And so the idea is you can't have one group of, Orthodox worshippers, Celtic Christians celebrating Easter at different dates. The Roman Church is really about centralizing all of that.
Yeah.
It's possible, I've heard worse. But the notion of the Templars, for example, you're having 8 columns, and the number 8 being a number used with the associated with the Knights Templar, might actually fit in with calculating the date of Easter. So, for example, you have the transits of Venus in the night sky that occupy a 40-year cycle. And these perturbations every 5 years. So you do 5 years on an 8 cycle. If you can plot where Venus is in the morning sky, you should be able to accurately date when Easter will be around that year. And that might, I've heard worse, link into the notion of the pentagram, just as an example, that's sometimes associated with the pentacle with the Knights Templar. It's possible.
It's funny. I never gave it a lot of thought, but, of course, with Christmas and in other holidays, we have a specific day designated, a date, a day and date designated. But with Easter, it does float, because it's not calculated by a certain date. It's by other things. So it's just odd. I've never really given that a lot of thought before, but I guess
Happy Mithras is what I tend to say. So.
Yeah, there's a lot of holidays on December 25th, I think. But, that's so interesting how that came about. But now, if St. Brendan himself didn't get over as far as to the New World, then does that still sort of signal that there were other Celtic travelers coming, and they just kind of gave, put his name on it, as they do sometimes because they wanted a hero? Or
I think the Brendan thing now, I don't completely rule it out, but I think it's unlikely. I think he landed on the geographical continent of North America.
Oh, you think
by an island that's splitting between the Eurasian and North American plates, Iceland. I think that's certainly possible. But again, come back to it. You have these Irish fishermen, women who are fishing off the coast of Canada. It's the fact that his voyage is plausible. Yes. That leads us into some of the very interesting notions that could he have travelled that way. So, for example, the legend of the exploration or the voyage, hence the navigator. I mean, there's no doubt he travelled quite a bit by sea. Is this description of landing in paradise, a place that was 10 times the size of Ireland. That it's possible that an Irish clan family, in other words, the Fomorians, sought refuge in paradise after defeating in battle. Now, I don't know, is this an allegory for heaven? How would you know what heaven is unless you've been to hell? All of this is encapsulated within the Brendan narrative.
But too, it's like, okay, yeah, what if he did land and he, but how would he know how big it was? I mean, when you land on a shore, how do you know how far the land goes?
Well, unfortunately, as much as I love swimming and being on the ocean, the one thing I've not had too much experience is navigating. I think if you're traveling the length of Brendan, you would know roughly the size. The Norse, for example, had a unit of distance. How far could you row within one day? It's almost certain that people at the time had a very similar calculation. So, for example, if you said it would take 4 rowing days to I don't know if it does, but I'm just saying 4 rowing days from north to south of the island of Ireland. Then if he then proposes, well, it's 10 times, so it'd take 40 days. That gives us a rough idea as to the size of wherever it is that he ended up. Yeah,
I got you. Yeah, and you're right. If they're traveling the length of the coast, then obviously they can see even that is an indication that it's a huge place, even just going vertically.
I mean, the proposed date of his travel is sort of between 512 and 530. And it's quite a long period of time to be journeying, for example.
We have a question here from the chat room from Kathy. She says, have either of you read the Sister Fidelma books by Peter Tremaine? The stories take place in the 7th century and are of the early church in Ireland. I have not. I have to confess. But what I will do, Kathy, is I'll look it up.
Yeah, Kathy, I haven't read that. Tremaine, I think, is a Cornish name, but I haven't heard of them, so it's something to look up.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that, Kathy. Yeah, we learn something all the time on this show ourselves, or at least I do. I know with every single guest, and especially with you, because you are my font of knowledge, so I constantly am turning on that tap. But so if it probably wasn't likely that Brendan made it, when do you think or at least made it all the way to North American shores? When do you think the first group of Celts would have made it, or is there evidence for when that would have been?
Again, we call them Celts. They didn't refer to themselves in this way. I think it's incredibly likely that those people fishing off the coast of the Americas would have landed for water. I think it's almost certain. But if it's just somewhere you go fishing, you're not really going to jot it down, and you don't want your competition getting in either. So I think it's quite possible that you end up with people who will be forever undocumented, I think, in history, having been there personally. The Brendan narrative is it is for me very curious because he, I think, landed somewhere. And so, if we just have a quick look at the proposed voyage, shall we say? So, again, Brendan has built a curragh. Apparently, he's a boat builder as well, multi-talented. Again, this is a wattle construction, hides, perhaps whale skin, again, to make the boat secure from leaking and all of this. He then fasts for 40 days. So you've clearly got a lot of Christian influence going on here. Prays on a shore, and off he goes. So he assembles some non-believers. He assembles some monks to go with him on this voyage. The voyage itself references hell. So you've got a very early exploration of hell being this fiery place. So I quote, this is from the Navigatio Sancti Brandani Abatis, which is from around the 900, so a good few hundred years after Brendan allegedly began his voyage to the Americas. And he says, great demons threw down lumps of fiery slag from an island that had rivers of golden fire. Now, for me, that sounds suspiciously like the word volcano. And we do know somewhere in the Atlantic, not too far away. There you go, Iceland. Still called the land of ice and fire.
They have an icy one right now, actually. I've been watching.
It's really interesting. And, of course, there's also this description of the smell of eggs and sulfur, which you almost certainly get with volcanic activity and all of this. So, the voyage goes like this. Basically, he has assembled these monks. They've fasted. They find an island that has a dog on it. No people. There's then a depiction of, I think it's a young boy, or it might be a teenager. I can't recall. But who is eating milk, bread, and honey. Again, a religious reference which they share. They then find an island inhabited by sheep. And this is interesting because it's proposed that this is just before Easter. So again, you've got a lot of religious influence for this. They hunt whales, eat fish on an island called Jasconius, who turns out to be a sort of demon snake thing. And I apologize for the quality of this picture. The medieval and dark age monks weren't expecting us to use this on the technology, so this is as good as we can get. But for those who are watching, there is a depiction of the boat of St. Brendan with a curiously English-looking flag, nestled upon a great snake or sea monster, whatever. And that's the idea. Very similar to a Norse. Snake that's associated in Norse mythology, eating its own tail, and then ultimately the Midgar serpent, as it is, who ends up destroying the earth. But very similar sort of ideas. So yes, Brendan ends up on a sea that he describes as coagulatus, sort of clotting. It's not a very nice thing to describe the sea. But if you have ever seen the sea with a lot of seaweed, it certainly looks like a very thick soup. So that might help us try and establish where it is that he is. In the Faroe Islands, for example, they firmly believe that Brendan discovered the Faroe Islands. Faroe Islands are just to the north west of Orkney in northeastern Scotland, sort of midway between Scotland and Iceland, if you will.
What kind of journey would that have been to Iceland from where he set off?
What kind of a
journey? How long would that have taken?
Most likely a few weeks. It wouldn't have taken too long. The Norse knew how to island hop, and just as an example, in the 800 and 900s, when the Norse do end up in Greenland and Iceland, they find Irish monks already living there. Of which case they go, right, lads, clear off, otherwise you know what's coming to you, and off they go. But look, we've got a pre-built home for us now, said the Norse. So really, it'd have island hopped, stopping for water. So we know, for example, Brendan went to Iona, where Columba had established a monastery, replenished stocks, and then further north in Scotland, then perhaps to the Faroe Islands, and then perhaps to Iceland and maybe beyond. So a few weeks.
Could be. So I know next hour we're going to get into Henry Sinclair voyages and what we know, what we don't know, and what we'd like to know about those journeys. And but go ahead.
I was just going to say, just on Brendan, it's his voyage, wherever he ended up, captured the imagination of not just those in the Americas, but the Canary Islands. I mean, he refers to the land masses, the Fortunate Isles, which are often associated with the Canaries, the Azores, Portugal and Madeira in the Atlantic is associated with Brendan. The Faroe Islands, as I've said. There's... I think if I were to just stake my own view, is I think it's much, much, much more likely that Brendan ended up maybe as far as Greenland.
Oh, Greenland.
For example, the Norse say it would take 4 full days rowing to get from Iceland to Greenland. In the context of things, it's doable.
Yeah, it is. Very.
From there, a few weeks over to Canada, it's certainly possible. But I think realistically, in a whaleskin boat, I think we're going to be a little bit limited to the full extent of where we could have ended up.
So is it possible he had a different vessel? Or we know that was the state of the art at the time?
It was the state of the art at the time. It's possible, but the thing with these carracks is they can be very easily repaired. They are sturdy. I think in the 1970s, someone repeated the proposed journey from Ireland to North America in a carrack.
Oh, they did?
Yeah, and we know it's doable. So this is where I say I can't rule it out completely. It's possible.
Well,
it has been repeated.
It is. And I mean, we tend to think, as you said, very arrogantly about the people that came before us, as if they weren't ingenious and as if they weren't inventive and figured out things. I think it's a lot like when you would hear stories about in the whole bloodline milieu of Jesus and or Mary Magdalene coming to France. And I remember early on people were saying, how could they have done that? That's ridiculous. They couldn't have made it. Well, they could have easily done it. And in fact, people did all the time. It's just a zip across the Mediterranean, which is nothing like the Atlantic Ocean. But it's like even that short of distance, we tended to have our doubts at the possibility that it was even able to be accomplished.
Well, the length from one side of the Mediterranean to the other is larger than the distance between Africa and South America, for example.
Right.
Distances. Just to sort of conclude with the Brendan stuff, it was I think his name was Tim Severin or Thomas Severin, who it was in Tim Severin. Sorry, just looking at my notes there. In 1976, recreated the journey, and whether or not this happened. I mean, let's just contrast the Catholic Church, powerful priesthood. In the Celtic Church, there'd be no crucifixion and all of this, but I absolutely adore a contemporary reference to the Irish who were found in Scandinavia, who were found in Europe, and they were called the Wandering Scholars. I just think that's absolutely beautiful. These learned, well-educated monks and others found all across Europe. So it is possible. But again, just like Maddock, I do have to come to a conclusion that it's a lovely story, but I think it's a bit of a push to see whether or not the Irish or Welsh ended up in the Americas. But it's a brilliant story, full of drama, islands with Judas Iscariot on randomly, all of the rest of it. So It's a good story to tell.
Well, it looks like it's about time to take a break. So we're going to do that now. And when we come back, more with historian James Martin and more with the exploration of the New World. We'll be right back.
Hello, I'm Ratherby Squidding, co-host at the Unidentified Celebrity Review. The holidays can be a quiet time for news. Not so for the UFO topic. Whether the powers that be are trying to hide developments within the holiday hubbub, or it's just coincidence, we seem to get big news drops and UFO legislation around this time. And this Thanksgiving, there was extra heat added to the topic. As Congress discussed plans for one governmental UFO program, the Pentagon announced the formation of another. Will the formation of the latter convince Congress that the former is not needed? Can the programs coexist? Do they compete or cooperate? There is a lot up in the air, and we have our eyes on it all. You can catch us here on KGRA-DB live Fridays at 1 p.m. Pacific, and live on YouTube at the Unidentified Celebrity Review, Monday through Wednesday at 4 p.m. Pacific. And catch us at Thursdays at 4 p.m. at the Singularity Lab. Times do occasionally change, so subscribe and ring that notification bell on YouTube. You can also find us on Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm hoping that the UFO community has something to celebrate come Christmas. Perhaps, like most developments in this realm, we'll get more new questions rather than answers, but often these new questions can shed new light on old topics. Case in point, Santa Claus. As we consider the extreme possibilities behind UAP, such as interdimensional beings, it makes the fantastical abilities of mythical creatures like Santa Claus plausible. You likely gave up your own belief or never held it, thinking that an entity that was always watching everyone and could visit every household in a single night, impossible. But if you consider interdimensional entities a possible explanation for UFOs, you might have to rethink your disbelief. Check out my videos on the subject over at my YouTube channel, Ratherby Squidding, And stay tuned to KGRADB and the Unidentified Celebrity Review. When Santa shows his face, or we learn the fate of the government's nascent UFO programs, you'll hear it here first.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to Night Vision. I'm your host, Renee Barnett, and my guest is our regular favorite historian, James Martin. We're talking about the discovery of the Americas. Who's responsible, other than, of course, the people that were already living here? So, I think we've covered St. Brendan because there's, not a lot of information. I think, what's out there, at least as far as what I saw, I think we've pretty much covered that. And you're right. It's a very interesting story. It's a kind of a romantic notion or something. It almost seems like to me. But as you said, he probably did get somewhere. We just don't know quite how far he got to our actual shores over here. But another group of expeditions that has been talked about a lot in a lot of different ways. There's controversy surrounding them. And I know you know a lot about the Sinclair expeditions through your research on your own and the research that you and Tim Wallace Murphy, who is your co-author on the book, the late, great Tim Wallace Murphy, did together. So can you give us a little sort of thumbnail of the sort of understanding, the public understanding so far of the Earl of Orkney and his trips over, and then set us straight on how we have it all wrong. So I'm going to sit back and I'll see you at the end of the show.
See you then. I've got to declare a conflict of interest, I suppose. The Earl is a relative.
I know.
From way back when. So
now, is he a relative of mine too, or no? We don't know, do we? I know I've got some Sinclair stuff going on.
You got some Sinclair, so I assume so.
Anyway, I'm paying my rent. Let's just put it that way. So, so I think if he is a relative, neither here nor there. So go ahead.
I think when again, let's set our stall here. Give a bit of context as to the time period. So, Brendan, if you were with us just for the break, is around in the 6th century, around this period. We now jump well ahead into the 14th century. So we're in the 1300s, the middle of the 1300s. So what's gone on in the 1300s? Well, for those of you who are very interested in the Knights Templar, well, they're no more. What happened to them? And that's subject to a book that I'm finishing research on. So the Earl Sinclair, I'm not really too sure, firstly, why it is people refer to him as Prince Henry Sinclair. I'm not really too sure where that comes from, but he was the Jarl of Orkney. Now, you'll have noticed we've gone from Earl to Jarl.
Jarl.
What the reason for that is the Jarldom of Orkneyinga is in fact property of the King of Norway. And this is a heritage of the Norse conquests and exploration of the British Isles. There used to be a kingdom of the Isles, which spanned from the Isle of Man through the Western Isles that we spoke about before with Brendan. right the way over. I'll put up the map again for those who are watching, but right away from, if you're watching this, you'll be able to see a big island between Britain, well, just off the coast of Cumbria, Northern Ireland. That's the Isle of Man. If you look at all of the islands dotting around the west of Scotland, right the way round the northern tip of Scotland, that was the Kingdom of the Isles. So Orkney is a sort of remnant of this, and Henry Sinclair, the Sinclairs, who I'm entrusted as the Jarls of Orkney, owe their fealty, their allegiance to the King of Norway, but also to the King of Scotland. So there's a bit of a tussle between them, shall we say. Now, the Sinclair family originated in France. They are from a place called St. Clair. And they established themselves in Scotland following the Norman conquests and marriage and settlement in and around the area of Edinburgh and Lothian. Over time, though, they married into a variety of Norse families, local clans, etc., etc. So almost certainly had knowledge of previous Norse expeditions, Leif Erikson, Eric and Raud, Eric the Red, in their exploration of North America. That's not questioned. They were in North America around 1000 AD. So they certainly would have had knowledge of that. And it'd be very unlikely for anyone living in former Norse territory, at least in Scotland, for them not to know that there was a big landmass further past Greenland. So that sort of sets the stall. And if we jump ahead just a little, the Sinclair family, some of them were Templars, some of them actually, and somewhat surprisingly for those who've been to Rosslyn Chapel, will be surprised then that at least two Sinclairs ended up giving evidence against the Templars during their downfall. But if we skip to 1398, there it is, again, we're going to have to use the word alleged, unfortunately, that two Venetian navigators, Antonio and Niccolo Zeno, are brothers, so they're sometimes called the brothers Zeno, or the Zeno brothers, etc. If you wanted to do some more research, Zeno brothers, Zeno exploration. Zeno is Z-E-N-O, or Z-E-N-O. Okay, there we are. Just translating for everyone.
Yeah.
And it's proposed that they went from Orkney in 12 ships with 300 Knights Templar. Now, you'll just spot a slight problem with that already. The Templars were disbanded really between the periods of 1307, 1312, 14, around that period. We're in 1398. Almost certainly there isn't an official body of Knights Templar. They could be the descendants of them, but it would be very unlikely that nearly 100 years later there's still original Templars around. Certainly in this period, life expectancy is you pushing it at 50. So it could be the descendants, but 300 people on a voyage like this would have been much more catalogued. So I think we can rule out that number for one. And their journey takes them to the Faroe Islands, to Iceland, Greenland, and then over onto Nova Scotia. And the Zeno narrative, this is, say, the story of that exploration, is documented and is, it's perhaps shows up on a bit of a map, which I will show you in just a second. So within the context of things, what is it that what's the reason for the journey? Well, there's a colony in Greenland that has been inhabited by the Norse for around about 200-300 years prior to the 1390s, if not a little longer. And the principal settlements are called the Eastern and Western settlement. There's about 3,000 people living there. And that's colonized around about 1000 AD onwards. And the Greenland, in original marketing, I don't know if anyone listening is in PR, but the Norse had settled Iceland, and that gives you a bit of an impression that it's going to be cold. Not very good if you're trying to attract colonists. Greenland, on the other hand, well, they could.
Great.
It's great, yes.
It's colder than Iceland.
Well, it is, but in this period, we're in a period of warming. So actually, the global temperatures are around about a degree warmer than today. So there would have been some greenery, no trees or anything like this. But there would have been some greenery. It had been a little more comfortable to live.
Peeping up through the ice, I guess, maybe.
Yeah.
Lion.
It's still harsh living, so don't think, it's bikini time in Godfarb, for example. It really, really isn't.
Yeah.
But it's a little more comfortable. And in the 1350s, due to reasons that are relatively certain, but it's believed, a series of volcanic eruptions, perhaps near Indonesia, perhaps Krakatoa, or the previous iteration, instigate a period of global cooling that is known as the Little Ice Age. And that begins around the 1350s. Lasts really up until the industrial period. We're now in a period of warming, as we know. So, what happened to the people inhabiting the eastern and western settlements as the climate gets colder, living becomes much more difficult? Where did they go? Now, if you're thinking that this is just some isolated colony, it's not. It's on a main trade route to North America. Greenland, Iceland, over to Norway, northern Scotland. We've spoken in previous shows about the unicorn and that kind of stuff, so I'm not going to repeat that. But what happened to those people? These are Christians, by the way, by the 1350s. The Bishop of Nidaros, today's Trondheim, is their bishop. So there were established churches here. Contact is lost. And there's even papal instigations. We need to go and find, the last Christians and the last pagans of Europe. What happened to them? There are pagans living with Christians and all of this. What happened to them? And can we go find them? And I think that if the Zeno voyages were genuine, I think it was a dispatch to try and establish where they went. Where did their kinsmen end up? And I think that would give some solid motivation for a journey over to the Americas. And if you're in the eastern and western settlements, again, there aren't any trees. So really, what you have is what you have. It would be easier to get to Canada, Markland, for example, the land of trees, as described by Ericsson in 1000 AD, to head in that direction than it would the dangerous journey across the straits between Greenland, Iceland, and onwards. So I think that sets our scene
Yes.
for at least a bit of context.
Okay. So, can you talk a little bit about the background on the Earl of Orkney and those expeditions, and also, if you like, Tim's sort of relationship with the Sinclairs and how that became one of his research focal points. Or I don't know which came first, the chicken or the egg. Was he, researching the Sinclairs and then met them, or was it the other way around?
Yeah, you'll have to ask me to tell the joke about the chicken and the egg later on. So, firstly, Tim's relationship with the Sinclairs comes from really a long-standing friendship with Niven Sinclair and his investigation into the Knights Templar. What happened afterwards, there was a book Tim wrote called Templars in America. He didn't like the title at all. But essentially, he was investigating the origins of the Knights Templar. Tim was a key player in the Friends of Roslin, who long before the Da Vinci Code came and made that place incredibly popular as it is today, trying to repair a badly damaged roof, trying to restore, protect and save some of the carvings that were inside this very damp church, to protect them for future generations. And that interest in the Sinclairs and potential voyages to the New World really stem from this image now. There are plenty of plants depicted in Roslin Chapel itself. This is a famous image, perhaps depicting corn. So if you just look at the lower arch, you can see perhaps some North American maize, corn, etc. Mm-hmm. There are plenty of other plants of North American origin in that chapel. How did they end up there? I mean, the chapel doesn't begin construction until the 1420s. So how would they have known about plant matter from the Americas? Where did that come from? I think really that was the jumping point for Tim into this voyage. So he ended up reading about the Zeno brothers, and of course having a Sinclair as a bestie, as a best friend, certainly helped him along with that.
In fact, his dedication of this new book is to Niven Sinclair, one of his oldest and dearest friends.
Tim asked when I continued this, he asked very specifically for that dedication to Niven. Yes.
Yep. Well, they were very, very dear friends. I got a chance to meet Niven one time. Got a chance to go over and visit and stay at his place in Surrey with Tim and Niven. It was an interesting trip. Always interesting to see Tim, of course. Always have a good time, a good laugh and a good time. But so his interest basically was spurred by those images in Roslin that depicted plants that shouldn't have really been there, that obviously were corn or maize and came that were indigenous to the Americas. So can you talk a little bit about what he found out and then how you joined that same research journey with him?
Yeah, so Tim was, again, looking at the Sinclairs, the fealty to the Norse, this now Christian kingdom, and had begun investigating some Viking, as was referred, if we're proper about it, Norse exploration into Iceland and Greenland. And really that's where we kicked off from many years before this book, by the way. So I had written for my master's, I was writing, I think at the time, around the exploration of the Norse and what that was doing to the economy. So this discussion exploded, really. So the Earl of Orkney began really cultivating trade as far afield as Venice and further on, but began cultivating trade. So, for example, Shetland, Orkney, people who were living on those islands were traveling quite some distances in fishing vessels to try and raise, a subsistence, to try and feed themselves. And there wasn't much by way of money in these remote islands. So the islands operated a barter system, which is a slight problem for the Earl of Orkney. If you don't have if people aren't using cash, how do you tax them, and pay your dues to your lord? So one way to do that was to begin to instigate a lot of trade, and he did so. There were lots of things that he did. So during his tenure, the islands began becoming relatively rich, or comparatively, from trading fish, herring, cod, that were in large demand in Scotland, England, northern France, Brittany, Norway, Denmark. So there was, really these islands end up on the map. And it's from this that you end up with the Zeno brothers. And the Zeno brothers were cartographers. They were expert sailors, and they end up in the Orkneys, and quite the motivation behind that is really up to debate. But it's from here that their plans, plots, and journeys over the Atlantic really begin to get some fruition. And so
what were some of the ideas about their reasoning? What do you suspect was the reason?
Well, I suspect that you've got a lot of trade, as I've said, which Venice is a marine republic, famous for trading in the Black Sea, in the Middle East, much further afield as well. And I suppose, how do you corner a particular market? That would be my suspicion. There are some, perhaps some other notions of connections with the Knights Templar. Again, I'm just very hesitant to go much further than that, because, as I say, the Templars were not an order at this point.
I guess that's the controversial part, or the main controversy surrounding this theory of the Zeno expeditions, is that there was a Templar connection, but yet we don't really have any evidence of that. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly possible that Scotland had been excommunicated from the church, and perhaps offered a harbour to fleeing Templars. I can fully get behind that.
Wasn't there some evidence that some did go and join up with the Cistercians, or
yes, absolutely, absolutely.
Okay.
I think some of the carvings that I've discovered on the western side of Scotland also lie with fleeing Templars, perhaps.
Yeah.
But how did the Zeno brothers meet and know about the Sinclairs and all of this? Well, Henry Sinclair had joined a failed crusade by I think he was King Peter of Spain, but it's in 1365, and one of the routes from Scotland, one stopping point was in the territories of Venice, and it's supposed that during that crusade, or the voyage to the crusade, failure, as I say, that it was there that he met the Zeno brothers, and it was from there as traders that they ended up joining. Now, the other side of this is during the period that we're referring to in the 1390s, Venice was at war and had been blockaded. It's a brilliant story. I don't think we've got time to go into it, but Venice was blockaded. So,
can you just give a little bit about why that was and what was going on there? I mean, without taking too much away from what else you were going to say. I'm interested to hear what that was about.
Yes. So you've got the expansion in the east by the Ottomans, by the reconquest of the Holy Land by Islamic forces, etc. They're getting their land back, and so trading opportunities, firstly with Venice, become a little bit more slim picking, shall we say. Further to this, Venice is in a series of conflicts with other trading powers on the Italian peninsula, and is having a bit of a hard time as well with the Ottomans. So it's essentially Venice is blockaded for a period. I think in 1391, it's proposed then that the Zeno brothers decided, our old friend Henry Sinclair, perhaps we should go and pay him a visit. Maybe we'll be a bit more fruitful in this way. There are other stories that say that the Zeno brothers returned to Scotland with Sinclair. Certainly possible. But I suppose with the absence of any concrete information, what I'm falling back on is they're traders. They're looking for trade opportunities. And here's somewhere that Venice isn't trading with.
And you said that the Zeno brothers were cartographers. So, I have to admit, I'm not familiar with what maps belong to the Zeno brothers. I mean, were they along the same, there we go. Are they along the same lines as the Cassinis who were doing all the mapping? How accurate do you find the Zeno brothers maps to be?
In terms of names, they are not particularly accurate, but I can say that the Zeno map projection was used for about 300 years after its proposed production.
Wow.
For navigation. And for those who are watching the show, what you can see in front of you is part of this map, which you can see the island of Engroneland, which is quite clearly, or Engroneland, which is most likely Greenland. I'll just explain some of the problems with the names of places. If you're not from the northern reaches of Europe, you're from Italy, pronouncing things, Tralee, for example, or is it Z or Z? Pronouncing things becomes a little bit more tricky. So you have Espedition. I tend to think that might be Scotland. You have some other places that really too sure where they're referring to, but we can take an educated guess. I think Eastland is quite clearly Iceland. But for some of these other places that are referred, we need to take a bit of an educated guess as to where it is that they're referring.
Got it.
But the maps themselves, so Estoti land, I think it's Scotland, but I have also, it could very well be, I don't know, Nova Scotia. It is depicted as being 1,000 miles off of Iceland. So, yeah. Again, we're taking some educated guesses. So either way, Stottyland's interesting in itself because local fishermen in the Orkneys had described it as being very rich and abundant in all things. The inhabitants were intelligent and as well versed in the arts as we are, and they obviously had some dealings with our people for some time. For example, in the King's Library, there are Latin books which they did not now understand, but were familiar. So that could very well be North America, and it could very well be, the meeting with the Norse, etc., etc.
Sure. So, what, aside from, the controversy about, when and where they met up and what happened, and about the Templar possibility of being involved there, is there anything else that's up for huge debate regarding? It sounds to me like if people were continuing to use their maps for navigation for hundreds of years subsequent to that there was definitely something authentic about them, and not everything was controversial. In other words, not everything was up for doubt. So,
I think the controversy comes really from little information, and again, this sort of academic arrogance that it's not possible.
Yes.
So I think that's the main root of controversy. Either way, the story goes that they ended up heading over to a place that Sinclair himself called a new world. It's not very flattering, though. Now, just remember the Vikings had referred to the native inhabitants of what they called Vinland as Skrailinga. And unfortunately, I can't translate what that means, but use your imagination and a few asterisks when you do so. It's not pleasant. Now, there might be some influence in that because, as I say, it's described as...
They were racist.
There were a few F words. Yeah, it doesn't sound nice, but anyway, use your imagination on that one.
Yeah.
So yes, Henry calls the natives savages, and the reason for that might be from the Zeno narrative, where he describes the following. He says, the locals came running down the seaside and attacked our men with bows and arrows. So many were slain and several hundred were wounded. Although we made peace signs to them, there was no use. Now, the Zeno brothers called Sinclair Zicpni. But again, we take a guess that it's Sinclair. It can only really be Sinclair. Sinclair saw that he could do nothing. He realized that the fleet would fall short of provisions if he were to persevere in his attempt. So in other words, what we can get from that is they have island hopped. They've gone over. They perhaps have seen that the eastern and western settlements are abandoned, and then carried on into the landmass of North America. They would have known where Vinland was, perhaps, because of previous exploration by the Norse. They've landed for provisions, water.
Did you know when he was talking about the savages? Do you know what where he was at that point? What tribe that he encountered then? Because didn't he later become good friends and associates with the Micmac tribe?
My guess would be the Thule slash Dorset cultures of northern Canada. Almost certainly they would have had some interaction with the Norse, and not necessarily pleasant ones, for the Norse to describe them in the way that they did.
Right.
I would suggest that it would be those.
And I would imagine those people that they encountered would have seen them as invaders, and so that's why the meeting wasn't so pleasant. Maybe. I mean, certainly, I can imagine, these strange, ships coming and these strangely dressed people, and they've got weapons and things, and I think a defensive posture wouldn't have been out of the question at that time. I mean, I think that would have been a normal stance to take.
Certainly, the Norse before them had experienced attacks like this. Not by all cultures. The native population in the Americas aren't one homogenous group, are they? But I'm just going to quote again. So I just want us to go back and we've left Orkney, the Zeno brothers who have met Sinclair on a failed crusade. They have either travelled back with them or travelled to them. And the motive for exploration is either one of trade, to find out what has happened to the colonists in Greenland, or perhaps even to find relatives from the clan Sinclair itself. With Sinclair, you've got a member of Clan Gun. You've got a group of people. I think we can rule out 300. And I think we can rule out 300 Templars. But you've got Navigator, and they are following the old Viking and Norse tradition of island hopping. It's safer. You can stop for provisions. And I just want to invite listeners, I wonder if we can see roughly where we are in this description. Then at last we discovered land. As the seas ran high and we did not know what country it was, we were afraid at first to approach it. But by God's blessing, the wind lulled, and then the great calm came. Some of the crew then pulled ashore and soon returned with the joyful news that they'd found an excellent country, better yet, with a harbour. So we brought our barks and our boats onto land. We entered the excellent harbour, and we saw in the distance a great mountain that poured out smoke.
Oh. Well, are we talking about Iceland again?
I think we're talking about Iceland or Greenland, for sure.
I don't know much about the volcanic activity on Greenland. Is that also a volcanic island?
There's some volcanism on the eastern side. My guess would be they've made it to Iceland.
Mm.
But again, this isn't what I've just read out there isn't a final part.
Right.
It's clearly part of an onward journey. So exactly. I think we've established that we're in Iceland now. And again, this island hopping would have continued.
Mm.
And so they end up describing a little further when they're there. So while we were at anchor here, the month of June came in, and the air of the island was mild and pleasant beyond description. Yet, as we saw nobody, we began to suspect that this pleasant place was in fact uninhabited. We gave the name of Trin to the harbour, and the headland which stretched out to sea we called Capo di Trin, or the Cape of Trin, perhaps. So, we can say roughly that we've got some dates now. So the name of the place, we believe that they made landfall on Trinity Sunday, and it's a movable feast, a bit like Easter. So we've got the dates of the 6th of June, 6th of June 1395, 28th of May 1396, 17th of June 1397, and the 2nd of June 1398, which is the date I favour.
That's my birthday. Not the year, mind you. Close.
Early. Was it a little earlier?
Very funny, young whippersnapper.
So, yeah, things like this are very useful in terms of dating things. So we've got a range, 1395, 1398. I tend to believe it's the latter. But they continue onwards over to, presumably then, the treeless Greenland. Then over onto the Americas itself. Now, back to, if you recall, the 1,000 miles. That gives us a bit of a radius. You've got a smoking mountain, so we can say, roughly, you'd be able to see that for about 40, 50 miles. So we could perhaps extend the radius a little, and it gives us a few places as to where they may have ended up landing. The preferred place is the town of Stellarton in the Pictou region of Nova Scotia. That would give you a settlement. It would also fit in with some descriptions too. So there we are. We've landed in North America, and yes, the local native population, the Mi'kmaq, described the voyage, and I think we can settle that, yes, they ended up in Nova Scotia and in that area. Now, quite what they were doing in that area, who were they trying to find? Did it have any correlation at all with the supposed Kensington runestone? Were they trying to find what happened to that expedition? Don't know. It's certainly motive, isn't it? What we do know, though, is that you have the Westford Knight, which, unless Weathering has decided to start carving knights on bits of stone, after several rubbings of that undertaken, and Tim had a good look at this, found that there was the herald, the crest of Clan Gun, who, in this separate narrative, the Zeno narrative, it had been explained that they went along with Sinclair. So the two and the two are beginning to line up a little bit more. In other words, we've got something that's plausible. Then, of course, you've got the Newport Tower nearby, which is it's very interesting. Is it a roundhouse? Are these the central pillars that we see? You have Cumberlandite embedded within the tower, which is I believe, the only naturally occurring magnetic rock. That's in the keystone. You've got some very unusual attributes. I think it's a bit much to say that this elaborate building was a windmill. But is this perhaps, a small homestead, a fortification, or something like this for that exploration, for that voyage of Sinclair? Because we're not sure exactly how Sinclair died or exactly when it was. But we know it was in a battle with the English, so we presume that he had returned, but quite when is up for debate.
Right. Now, this Newport Tower, do you know anything about its orientation, or doesn't it have aspects that seem that it might be oriented towards certain times of the year and light coming through, or is that something that sort of got built on later to the legend?
I understand that light shines through and hits the keystone on a particular date. I think, and please don't hold me to this, I think it's the date of the Feast of Mary Magdalene. I would really need to. It's been a little while since I did some research on Newport. I've got to be honest with you. I'd say a little while, not that long ago, but for that tidbit, I would need to get back into my archives, to be fair. But yes, there is, it most certainly does shine through, as I say.
Right. Yeah, it seems like I just remembered that I'd heard something to that effect. So yeah, I'm going to have to look into that myself as well to figure out. In fact, I'm pretty sure that our friend Gloria Amendola had actually been there on those particular days and seen that. Well, I don't know if it's a phenomenon. Since it was actually set up to be that way, I guess there's nothing really phenomenal about it. But I think she's seen that where the sunlight is coming and hit the keystone. I'll have to check with some of the other people in her group.
I mean, if it is the case, I mean, that might change the nature of the tower itself. It might be a baptistry. They may have converted, or at least that might have been the idea, to convert people into Christianity.
Right.
That's certainly plausible, and
what would you call it a baptistry? That do you think that they had some water there, inside there? I mean, I know it's next to the water, but I mean, normally in Christian baptism, you have water, but of course they can, of course there's just the holy water splashing type of baptism. I'm from the Southern Baptist where they actually dunk their whole body down in the water. But how would that ceremony have been conducted at that time? Would it have been like holy water, a blessing type thing? And
presumably with either oils, dependent upon your status in society,
right?
Basic dunking of the head in water, I suppose. But the reason I call it a baptistry is, or a church, is the fact that it bears striking resemblance to the Hendage Church, the Great Hendage Church in Denmark, Olaf's Church in Tonsberg, Norway, St. Michael in Schleswig-Holstein in Denmark, Osler's Church and Bornholm, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Cambridge, and more intriguing for me, bear in mind what I said about the Bishop of Nidaros being the bishop for Greenland. There were plans for a round church that have been uncovered, but there's a round church in Nidaros, the original church, and it bears striking resemblance to those plans.
Yep. Gotcha. That's really interesting. So if that is the case, would that give them more of a Norse origin?
Well, I mean, again, if we consider Sinclair, he was the Jarl. He owes his allegiance to the King of Norway. Of course, there are lots of. If you ever visit Orkney, you have a Nordic cross as the flag of. If you ever visit Orkney or the Shetlands, has the Nordic cross as its flag. There are a lot of Nordic influences still, very much so. Put it into context. Orkney is closer to Norway than it is London and Edinburgh, for that matter. It's so at the time where you've got, of course, there's going to be Norse influence because Sinclair was deep embedded in Norse culture, as would any of his lieutenants be. Fealty to the Norse king, and to the Crown of Scotland too.
Wow. So in we're in the final, like maybe 7 or 8 minutes of the show. So what is your opinion on of the groups that we've discussed, and even the ones that we didn't really discuss, but the other ones that were mentioned early on in the show? It was like, who do you think most likely got here first that wasn't already here?
That wasn't already here. I would probably say I'd split it into two. I think the Romans and the Phoenicians landed. Whether they got back or not, another thing, but certainly landed in South America. In North America, I think that honor does go to the Irish fishermen. I think around the 600s, where they described fishing off Canada, what we call Canada today. I think documented, though, I mean, with 100% certainty, that second prize goes to the Norse, for sure. But I suppose you could look at it in another way. It probably wasn't Christians that discovered North America. It was maybe a Celtic Christian, very separate in belief to perhaps what we have today. Or it could be some pagan Vikings.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, that would be my sense. I'd maybe even argue previous to the Phoenicians that the Polynesians may have ended up in South America. I tend to think that was a much more later time. For example, humans didn't get to New Zealand until 1300, for example. So it's quite late on. I'd maybe suggest that 1400 is when that trade and chickens and turkeys and all of this get exchanged. But yeah, I think the Romans and Phoenicians, South America. I think Africans in Central America with the Olmec, etc. And I think we're really what we've been discussing this evening. We've got a fisherman or maybe fishwoman somewhere in history, perhaps wouldn't have known the significance, would have landed there to get some water and then sailed back home.
Never the
sure. Well, hopefully.
I want to talk about fishermen with what's going on right now with the UK and France and the fishing and.
Oh, good God, yeah. World Whelk 3. Yeah, it's incredible. I don't think the concept of a border occurs to fish or crabs or anything like that. But
yes, they're just so unruly.
Deeply pathetic would be the way that I think of that. The other thing just to mention is, of course, with the Newport Tower, that might tie into our Zeno voyage and what happened to previous people who were looking for the East and Western settlements, or maybe even the Kensington expedition. Who knows? It was, of course, when we did the Dark Zone TV show, where I uncovered the
skeleton.
The skeleton in armor.
Suit of armor. Yeah.
Lizzie Borden's great aunt.
Yeah. Of all people.
Not the first Borden to be associated with swords and weaponry, but her great aunt discovered a skeleton in armor on the coast, really, a couple of miles from the Newport Tower, and that hasn't satisfactorily been explained. Could be the last remnants of I think James Gunn or someone from that voyage. Who knows? Unfortunately, we won't know. The only thing we have left is some fragments. Unfortunately, a fire in the 1920s destroyed that skeleton, unfortunately.
Oh, that's terrible. Before we end the show, we should probably talk a little bit about the book, because I am getting a lot of people who are asking me, where can I get it? How can I get it? And I'm saying soon. So if you can shed any light on that. I probably know about as much as you know right now, but I'm not sure as far as about when this book may be coming out.
In hardback, these are sort of special editions. So if you want to email me for more information, then contact both me and Renee at info@newrennies.org. There'll be more information on the website newrennies.org coming up. So do keep checking there. As for softback and ebook, plans are afoot for very, very, very early next year.
Good. Yeah,
So,
I know a lot of people are anxious, because obviously for those who were friends and fans of Tim Wallace Murphy, this obviously is his last published work. So I think it would be a great book to have, not only for that reason, but because of all the good information. And it's great to see your wonderful part in it. And I'm hoping that this is kicking off that next book about where the Templars went.
Yes, working title is Out of Order.
Out of Order.
Of the Knights Templar.
I love it. Well, we're down at the very, very end. I hope everyone has a wonderful Christmas. If you're celebrating Christmas, happy holiday season. No matter what you celebrate, I hope everyone has a happy, safe, healthy Christmas. And
can I just say the same? It's a privilege being on this show, and a great audience as well. I can see the chats and what have you. Wherever you are, if you can do me a favor, speak to someone who is perhaps lonely this Christmas and festive season. Just remind them that you're there for them.
Ringing.
But have a great holidays, everyone. And again, pleasure to be on.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.